So it's that time of year. The first frost might be coming tonight, and I wanted to share with you how I actually overwinter my jalapeno plants. This will be the second year bringing them inside and managing them for next year. Last year I believe I had 4 or 5 plants that I did this process to, and almost all of them made it, except well, they overwintered fine, but then the dogs knocked them off of the windowsill, so some of them didn't make it after that. But I'll show you which ones went in the garden this year, what they looked like, and how I'm going to trim them back to put back in the house again and save for next year. Okay, so this is one of the 3 jalapeno plants. It looks really sad because it's been knocked over. This bed had bush acorn squash in it, and you know, those things just vine incredibly and really push this plant over. But I'm going to show you how you can actually trim this down. You get rid of all this foliage and you basically just get back to the main central stalk. It looks super sad when you do it, but believe me, after going through this last winter, it will come back. So typically you will look for the main Y that comes off of the plant from the ground. Now this is a good example of one I just did. Doesn't look sad, it just looks like a twig. But you can easily see how this one had a nice good Y coming right out of the main stem, and I trimmed it all the way back. This was a good example. I actually wish I had videoed this one because you could see where it was brown from last year overwintering, and all of the new growth on it was really starkingly green against it. But this is ultimately what you want to get it trimmed back to. This one's going to be a little bit tricky because it grew a little funny. So like, I think that this here would have been the main Y, but this branch here has actually gotten to be more strong looking. So really, for now, I'm just going to take some of this off just to get a better idea of what we're looking at. And like, this looks like one of the stalks I left from last year, but it didn't have any growth. So I'm just going to cut that one off and get it out of the way now. I'm probably going to cut that off even closer, but for now, see, you can see where it's brown from last year and some of the new growth that was really green in contrast to it. But you're just gonna basically cut off to where some of these nodes are. So I'm really not gonna try and cut like in the center of some of these stalks. I'm gonna cut back to some of these nodes because that's where new growth next year is gonna come from. I know, and it looks so sad to cut this guy back so much, but being as this is the second winter that we're going into now, I'm gonna test it a little bit and see how aggressive I can be about cutting back. So here's where you can really see this is another stalk that didn't do anything, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. And now I'm gonna make a decision because I don't need all of these coming out of here. I'm gonna keep this one because I think it was from last year. It's one of the thicker ones, and then I believe that that's one of the main ones, but I don't need this extra little dude hanging out on the side there. And I think that this one is looking stronger. You know, actually, I like the shape of how that one's coming up better. Here's the other thing to think about as I'm reshaping this to go into a pot for next year. I can kind of change the way that it grew. So really, like, gosh, I really think I want to take this one off because this was growing really well, and this is just coming out at a really odd angle. This just really looks like this should have been the primary one. So I'm going to cut it right after that node again. And perhaps this will grow again next year, but that'll be fine because that's the whole idea. I want it to grow back. So this one's at an odd angle. I might not be able to get that much closer. Oh yeah, that one definitely had no more growth to it. So that is what we're gonna get it to look like. I'm gonna do that to my last one here, and then I'm gonna pot them. This was another funny one. It grew out kind of funny. So you You just kind of have to take your best guess on how you want it to shape. I think I really thought I was going to cut this one off, but I just decided to keep it. And you know what? We can just experiment and see what happens. Now, this last one I had, it was hiding back here amongst where the butternut squash was. I'm almost all the way done cutting it, but you can see how this one had another classic, really nice fork right there. So I'm going to cut these right above these nodes and leave them like that. Just another good fork right off that main stem. All right, so I just have these, I believe they're 1 gallon pots. You don't want it to be too big because we're not really promoting growth here. We just are giving it a place to hang out for the year, or the winter. So ideally you'd have a little garden shovel. I didn't feel like going and getting mine, so I'm just gonna make sure that I kind of scoop it out in a somewhat gentle manner. I don't want to just pull it from the stalk. There's gonna be some root damage, but I'm gonna try and minimize that as much as possible. So the other thing to note is there is some of the garden soil going in here, but I am going to take these in the house and finish up the tops with indoor potting soil because I don't want to bring in a bunch of bugs, and the potting soil is sterilized and should eliminate some of that. And again, this is more just for dormancy for, oops, I got some other root system in there. Okay, so now I'm in the house and I'm just going to add in the potting soil into all of these. You'll notice that each of my pots is in a sacrificial Tupperware. That's I saved from last year, and that's really so that it contains some of the dirt and the water, of course, because these pots have holes in the bottom, of course, for drainage, and I'm just going to keep them on the windowsill, so I obviously don't want my windowsill getting super dirty. So like I was saying, this is a good time to reorient the way that your peppers are growing. So what I'm going to make sure that I'm doing is some of these that were growing a little bit sideways, that were getting pushed over in the garden, I'm just going to resituate the stem and the roots so that they start growing more upright. Now the other thing to note with peppers, unlike tomatoes, for instance, tomatoes, the stalk, it will create more roots all along the stalk. Peppers don't really do that, and they don't want to be buried very much. So that's just to say, even though these are sitting a little bit down in the pot, I don't want to just cover up the whole stalk with more dirt. I'm basically just going to cover it to the level that it already was out there in the garden, and leave it at that. And honestly, like, I'm not going to be super heartbroken if these don't last until next year. I'm already super pleased that this worked this last winter and that I didn't have to go buy any peppers this year, pepper plants, that is. So I just kind of treat it like an experiment. You know, if it doesn't work for you, well, it was worth a shot anyway, right? I mean, if you're able to save a little bit of money and a little bit of work into next year, then might as well try. You're just going to rip them up and throw them away anyway, so you can see if it'll work. And the last thing that I was going to say about it was you'll really just check on them and water it just, I don't know, maybe once a month, I think is what I was doing last winter. We're not promoting growth, but it does need some water to still, you know, survive next year. But peppers, if you already know from growing them outside anyway, they don't require a whole lot of water, so you don't want to be really saturating them. So it's super easy to keep an eye on them all winter long. And come spring, it's so rewarding and exciting. Just like any gardener knows, when you're seed starting or just putting it out in the garden, watching it start coming to life is super exciting. And seeing these just hang out in the windowsill and you're not doing anything else, and then they start budding, it's it's really exciting to see that little bit of growth. The other thing to note with that, you don't have to put them by a windowsill. Here in Western Washington, it does get somewhat cold, but being indoors, for me at least, it was a warm enough environment for them, and they still maintain some sunlight. But wherever you keep yours at, you might need to throw in a grow light or some heat pads or something. But for me, the windowsill worked perfectly fine. So nothing to it. There they are. They're gonna sit all winter long. I'll just check on them and give them some water as they need it. They have had a big shock right now. If you wanted, it'd be a great time to add some sort of fertilizer. I didn't last year and didn't have a problem, so but I have really rich soil as I amend with straight compost every year, so I haven't needed to do that. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that this was helpful and inspiring for you, and I hope to see all of your new pepper growth next year. And if I remember, I'll actually try and take some video next year of planning it out and showing you how these look after going all winter. Thanks.